She said she was going to come right in at 6, so. All right, good, how are you?
And the volume's working today.
She's just not
Perfect.
Oh, really?
It's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. I do just want to announce before we get started that there is a concert at 7 o'clock that we are hoping to get to be able to support the kids in the concert. So just keeping that in mind as we move through the evening. There will be a couple people that will linger after 7 that don't have kids in the concert if more questions are needed at that time. So just wanted to make sure everybody knew that that was happening this evening as well. With that, I'll turn it over to our budget manager, Matt Crum, for his presentation.
Actually, yeah,
sorry.
I'm going to start. So I would like to thank you all for coming tonight. Before we begin tonight's presentation with Mr. Crum, our business manager, I just want to take a moment to thank the board for your continued leadership and guidance throughout this budget process. I'd also like to express my appreciation to our business official, Mr. Crum, and our administrative team for the many hours dedicated to analyzing data, exploring staffing and programming possibilities, and ensuring our financial decisions remain aligned with our instructional goals. Budgeting in public schools is a very challenging process these days, and this team has remained dedicated to identifying efficiencies while prioritizing the needs of students every step of the way. To our parents, staff, and community members, thank you for your feedback, your questions, and engagement over the past several months. Your input has been an important part of shaping a budget that reflects our shared values and priorities. This budget reflects our continued commitment to our district's mission of educating every student every day. Every decision has been made with a focus on maintaining the staffing and programs that support quality instruction, student learning, social-emotional well-being, and equitable opportunities for all of our students. Tonight's hearing is an opportunity to review the proposed budget in full transparency and to reaffirm our collective commitment to putting our students first. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Crum, our business official.
Thanks, Bill, and yes, just to echo that, thank you to the Board of Ed, the administrative team, faculty, staff, students, community members. The budget that was adopted by the board last month and is up on the ballot next Tuesday is the result of months of very hard work, months of gathering feedback, both internally here at the district and also throughout the community. I believe we had roughly somewhere between 12 to 15 public meetings that people could attend, provide feedback. They were better attended this year. We did receive a lot of feedback. The feedback was not taken lightly and was taken into consideration to get to this adopted budget. We also received a lot of community feedback through phone calls, emails, thought exchange type mechanisms that we have through our website. So again, we thank the public for their participation. My presentation is going to be brief. Really, the specifics of the budget were really outlined in those dozen or so public meetings the last couple months. Nothing has changed, obviously, since the budget was adopted. There is more detail in the budget newsletter that went out to the community in the past week or so. So I will kind of zip through this presentation, touch on some of the key points, and then we will have an opportunity for public feedback at the end. So the budget will be on the ballot next Tuesday for vote. Represents a 6.37% increase in spending from 24-25, the current year, to 25-26. And that puts our total budget at just over $16.6 million. I think it's important to remind folks and reiterate the fact that this budget keeps everything intact for the current school year. All program, all staffing, and all existing levels. That's important. As Bill mentioned, our mission here at HCS is to educate every student every day. It's becoming harder. Okay, we've talked about at these meetings what's happening with our enrollment, what's happening with our demographics, what's happening with what our students are gravitating towards. For us to continue to meet that mission of educating every student every day, we have to do things a little bit differently. And certainly this year, we're going to do some things differently, which we'll get into in a minute. In order to balance the budget, in order to raise our expenditures by that amount, it does require a tax levy increase of 9.2%. This does exceed the allowable levy limit under the tax cap laws in New York State. Okay. The tax cap in New York State's been around since 2011, 2012. We'll talk about this a little more in a minute on the next slide. This will be the second time in that time period that we are seeking an override of that allowable levy limit. Because the tax levy increase exceeds that limit of 4.27%, it will require 60% supermajority of the voter turnout next Tuesday. We are continuing to allocate reserves. If you recall, a year ago, at this point of this process, we were faced with a difficult decision because we had federal stimulus funds, post-COVID funds, if you will, that we were receiving that were expiring. And those were funds that we used to enhance and expand our program offerings to meet our students' needs. Specifically, those needs that really became magnified post-pandemic. The level of needs that our students have right now are like none we've ever seen before. So despite a declining enrollment, we've seen an increase in the number of students with special needs and also the array of the needs that these students have. And in order for us to continue to meet those needs, we needed to come up with a plan to continue to provide the services and maintain the staffing that was added to those COVID funds. We cannot get by with one-shot infusions, whether it be reserves or one-time revenue sources. So last year we laid out a plan, a 4-year plan, to utilize roughly $750,000 of our reserves over a 4-year period, slightly reducing that on an annual basis. And we're still on track to do that. This budget overview this is a required format of all school districts in New York State. We have to present our budget in the 3-part format, meaning program, administration, and capital. This is laid out in more detail in the newsletter. The breakdown that you'll see here is very typical. Probably just about any school district that you see. The lion's share of our expenses are in personnel. Okay? Most of it is instructional personnel. We went through this in detail in the budget development process. Most school districts, you're going to see between 70 and 80% of that budget in program, for no exception. 8 to 10% in administration and roughly 50% capital. You'll see a pretty good jump in our capital component this year, and that is because we are in sort of the last phase of our recent capital project, and that is converting short-term borrowings into long-term financing. And we finally wrapped up aid for New York State, so it's not that significant of an impact on the overall budget. And again, you'll see the sum of those 3 parts gives us our total budget, the 6.37% increase and the 9.2% tax levy increase required. The reality, folks, and we understand this, it's the same for us in our personal lives, it's the same for other areas, other businesses, other municipalities, other governmental agencies. Everything costs more. It's as simple as that. And again, for us to continue not only to offer the programs, maintain levels of staffing that we have, but to also keep up our buildings, okay? To do the things that we do on a day-to-day basis that make HCS what it is, this is what we're asking, this is what's required. Now, the overriding of the tax cap is not a decision that was taken lightly. So, briefly, why the recommendation from the administration to exceed the tax cap, and ultimately the decision by the Board of Ed to exceed that tax levy limit. On an annual basis, there's an uncertainty with state funds. Okay? Roughly 20% of our budget comes in the form of foundation aid. The state budget was actually just completed this week after this presentation was created. It was actually slightly favorable for us, which is strange. It usually isn't because of our size and because of our wealth and our demographics. There were a number of school districts that drafted and created their budgets based on the executive proposal that was released by the governor's office in January, and ultimately are getting less foundation aid as a result of the budget. The state has a budget deadline of April 1st. So this year was the 6th straight year that that budget was not on time. It makes things very difficult for school districts to plan and create their budgets for the following year. As is the case this year, May 20th, that's our vote. We vote. We have to have budgets adopted, prepared, do these meetings, distribute literature, regardless of the status of the state budget. This year was particularly late, which made things hard. There were changes made to this foundation aid formula. Okay? There were a couple key components this year were favorable for Hamilton. There was a commission that took a deep dive into the foundation aid formula. The prior formula was sort of status quo going all the way back to 2007. I think there was somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 recommendations that were made to tweak the formula to update it. A handful of those were made. We don't know what's going to happen moving forward. One, we don't know what changes, if any, are going to be made to the formula. And two, we don't know what the impact is going to have on the total pot of money, and certainly not the effect that it has on individual school districts. So there's a lot of uncertainty in state funding. Federal funding. We receive annually roughly $250,000 in IDEA and ESSA funds. These are key. These are very important for us to continue to offer programs and supports for students with disabilities and students that need extra support under the guidelines of ESSA. So there is uncertainty in that sense. We're hopeful that there's not going to be any impact on the 25-26 year and beyond, but there is that uncertainty. When we look at the historical, we take a historical look at the tax levy at HCS. All right? We've talked about this at length at our public meetings, at our coffees, at our forums. We get people's feedback, which is very important to us. We are unique in this region in that we are funded more by our tax levy than we are state aid. That's because of our wealth. Okay? Most of the districts in this region, particularly close by to us, the inverse is true. They receive more foundation aid than they do their tax levy. Makes up a bigger chunk of their budget. Okay? So as costs continue to escalate, okay, just inherently, we have to be more dependent. We benefit more by increases to our tax levy than we do through foundation aid. If we look at the tax cap era as we sort of consider it, dating back to 2011, 2012, this is the second time in the 14 years that we are putting forth a budget. A budget has been adopted that requires a tax cap override. The first time was 10 years ago, and it was a bit of an anomaly. Our calculation to determine what our allowable increase was actually negative. And we went out with low threes, I believe. So it was a bit of an anomaly. Other than that, we have not asked for a tax cap override. So it's not something that we take lightly. We always begin the process and try to obtain and create a budget that's tax cap compliant. If you look at the annual growth rates, if you will, of total spending and then the two main revenue sources, you'll see that in that 14-year span, the average annual increase in foundation aid is only 1.41%. That's the standard fundamental operating aid that we get from New York State. Our tax levy's gone up on average annually 2.86%, which we feel is very reasonable. We've been very diligent during that time period to keep that rate to a minimum. And our average spending over that 14-year period, total spending, so all three components of the budget, 2.23%. So you can see there, and it's depicted graphically here, we've had to rely more on that tax base, on that tax levy, to keep up with the expenditures that are going on. Okay? Again, we're a small school district of wealth. This is the way it is. Okay? It's not something that we take lightly. We understand the burden that people have. But again, in the 14-year span, you can see that there's been a shift. That blue line down there, support from the state, appears to be relatively flat compared to the other two.
Matt, can I ask a question?
I'm going to hold it until the end if you don't mind, Paul, because I just have sort of the housekeeping things to get through,
Okay.
and then we'll take questions and public comment. Is that okay? Just going to kind of zip through this. So next Tuesday, this is sort of the administrative stuff. There are 4 items, 3 propositions, yes, no propositions, and then our board seat. So the first proposition is for the budget. So it's a yes, no on the $16.6 million budget and the necessary levy there within, which is the 9.2% increase to the levy. The second one is for transportation, not to exceed financing in excess of $180,000. To be very clear, the principal and interest payments associated with the bus purchase are already embedded in the budgeted amount. So this is not in addition to the budget in Proposition 1. We engage in short-term financing over 5 years, which corresponds directly with transportation aid payments from New York State. It's also amortized over 5 years. So the net budgetary impact on an annual basis is minimal. Third proposition is on behalf of our friends at the Hamilton Public Library. They submit a petition to go on our ballot in March annually if they want to change that amount. So this is strictly on their behalf. They are piggybacking on our vote for their proposition for their tax levy for public support for the Hamilton Public Library. And lastly, we have 2 vacancies on our Board of Education seat, and we have 2 candidates. So this is for a 3-year term beginning July 1 of 25 through June 30th of 28. And we have 2 candidates that are both incumbents, Michelle Jacobson and Jennifer Jones. And there's also the opportunity for writing candidates on there as well. And then lastly, just a reminder that our vote is next Tuesday. This is the Universal Voting Day in New York State for all public school districts. It will be conducted from noon to 8 p.m. in the HCS bus garage. It's on the back side. We will have parking reserved for those that come to vote. Absentee and early voting ballots are currently available by seeing Jody Chantal, our district clerk, here at the district office. Those ballots must be received by 5 o'clock on the day of the vote. Jody's phone number is up there if you need that. She's available via email, or you can stop in and see her. And then lastly, which is an important note, who can vote? This is specified in the newsletter. We will have signage at the vote. We will have inspectors present for any assistance. You don't have to be a registered voter to vote in school election. So that's the first point. There are 3 criteria, though, and this is New York State education law. You have to be a U.S. citizen, 18 years or older, and you have to reside within that school district for at least 30 days prior to the date of the vote. So those are the 3 criteria that must be met in order to vote in our vote in our election. You do not have to be a registered voter to vote in the election. So that's sort of the housekeeping stuff. I want to just get through that. That's really it for the slideshow and the presentation. If there are any comments, questions, this would be the time unless the board has anything else to offer. Other than that,
I'd just like to remind people, if you have a question and you want to stay seated, please state your name. If you have comments, please make sure that you state your name and that you stick to our policy for community participation and do not exceed 5 minutes. Jody will be keeping time for all speakers.
Matt and Bill, just thanks to both of you for all the information you've given throughout the budget process and helping us understand all the complex factors that go into it. I'm just wondering, thinking about the administration portion of the budget to help people understand, if you could give maybe some idea of comparable, I'm just looking at the budget newsletters for our nearest neighbors. Looks like, so our administration's at 9.4% of our budget. Madison's at 10%. We have Morrisville at 11.2 and Sherburne's at 15.3. So comparably, do you think that's, if we expand the area more, we stay within that kind of lower than?
Yeah, honestly, Corey, I wouldn't put much stock into that. And I would be saying that even if we were on the higher end of the comparisons you made. There's really there are different expenditures that school districts recognize that they put in program, that others put in administration. But in general, I think you're going to see all districts sort of in that range, I don't know, 8 to 15%. So it can really vary on a year-to-year basis too. One of the big components that I know we include in our administrative component is legal fees. If there is a year coming up where you know you're going to have something that's going to require legal expenses, that's going to get bumped up. Some districts put all or some portion of their legal fees in their program budget because if it's related to program and students, then they're going to consider. So there's a lot of, you're really kind of splitting hairs, but I think in general you're going to see all districts sort of in that range. But ours is maintained relatively consistent. So, thank you, yes, but I don't want to really tout that too much because it's really, you really don't know.
How about, do you have ideas in terms of the number of administrators we have compared to our neighboring districts or similar districts?
I think it's pretty consistent amongst the small schools. Yeah, I think we're in the range of our neighbors. Some might have one less or two less. It's how you redistribute and what their responsibilities are. But our administrative team is needed for the function of this district and for it to function appropriately. And I think we have the right amount.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Go ahead and say your name and
So I'm
speak
Dersha.
loudly, please.
Yes, my name is Dersha. I have few concerns, right? So you stated, which is kind of misconception for me. So you're saying we have declining enrollment, but at the same time, budget is increasing. That's where I have a problem with, right? Because if enrollment declines, how the expenditure, and you sell special programs, but you already stated declining enrollment, so which means that people with special needs also decline in enrollment, right? So how it balances out the budget and the decline in enrollment. So maybe you have to look in a better marketing job to get more people into the school. Second of all, 9.20 is a huge increase on taxes. And what about people who do not have the second income? On one income, we have to maintain the houses, we have to maintain everything related to that, and basically it's going to increase on my tax, which I'm a single person, right? And I don't mind educating kids, but at the same time, I have a very big gap. Because how am I supposed my property tax lower than the school tax, which is kind of weird in this long expenditure. And how we, because the salary increase is only 3% per year, and increase of the tax is 9% per year. So how we are supposed to live, like literally live, on that money, which 500 probably increase to my tax, 350, I just calculated, right? And it's mortgage and everything. So I have a lot of questions about that, and sure, I'm not saying I'm not happy, I'm just saying I'm confused. And last year, it's also increased, my tax increased $150 from last year, with a scroll now. So how, and also the quality of education. So I hear a lot, and you said we are wealthy. Are we? Are we a wealthy village? Are we a wealthy town? Because we have a lot of people in town who cannot afford the grocery baskets. They cannot afford a lot of other things. How are they supposed to do that? So you show us because we are wealthy district, so we are not getting a lot of state, like medicine school, for example, medicine get. Are we allowed to get more financial aid from the state? Are we allowed to, or because we're so wealthy, they don't want us to pour money into the schools? So because I'm just concerned because it happens today and 60% of majority votes for that. What's going to be next year? Next year maybe you have to again increase tax cap 7% is huge. And I understand the cost of living and everything. I'm just like, I do not know how and I have to think about myself as well. Right? I have to be eccentric in that way. So how I'm supposed to cover bills with all the credits and I have to borrow money to even put windows in the house. So that's my biggest, and believe me, I believe in education. I've been in education more than 20 years. And I believe in education. But I believe that also education should not become the market or capitalist market or something like that. So we shall find it out.
So I'm going to go and thank you. That's very helpful. I'm going to get to a couple of his questions with regard to the.
I'll follow in the same vein as him.
Okay, great. Yep. So going back to your original question, with regard to the declining enrollment. So our total enrollment has declined, but the percentage of students with special needs has increased. Okay. So next year, for example, and again, this is getting into more specifics, nuts and bolts of the budget. We have 5 students that are currently educated at HCS that we are unable to provide an adequate and appropriate education. And those students are going to be educated at an alternative placement next year. That number currently this year is 11 students. It's going up to 60. The average cost of those 11 students this year is $58,000 in tuition in an outside placement. So that's a big part of it. As a small district, simply based on numbers, we have reached the point where we're sort of in between where a decline in enrollment is declining at such a slow rate, doesn't necessarily have an immediate impact on our staff. The best example I can give you is we have a kindergarten teacher that's retired. We have 2 sections of kindergarten with 20 in each section. We cannot simply say, we're not going to replace that kindergarten, we're going to go to one section. I know our kindergarten teachers love those little kids, but putting 40 kids in a classroom is not realistic. Okay? So that's a position we have to replace. Larger school districts, not that far from you. You're talking 30, 35 sections in a particular elementary grade. If you have a retirement, you eliminate that position through attrition, and your class size goes up by 1 student. That's how bigger districts are able to sustain and maintain programs and recognize savings through attrition that smaller districts are not. So I believe strongly there's this sort of misconception, this misunderstanding that a decline in enrollment has a direct impact on finances and should mean expenditures, particularly personnel expenditures, going down. We've seen that here that that's not the case. So as far as your next set of questions with how you live, I'm going to take that as sort of rhetorical. We understand that. I just want to add, as far as the distribution of the levy, and I'm disclosing this to be transparent. This does not mean your taxes are going up 9.2%. Some of you may go up more than that. Some of you would be less. The total levy is proposed to go up 9.2%. The distribution of that levy is out of the school district's hands. So there's additions to the tax base, there's deletions, there's additional exemptions that people get, and there's a million different things that can cause redistribution. So I hope that helps to clarify things a little bit with regard to student needs. We are looking, as Bill mentioned, and reverting back to our mission, every student, every day. We look at this on a recurring basis annually, every year. And what do we have to do to meet the needs of our kids? And this is a tough year with regard to our kids going to out-of-district placements. It's very costly. But we have an obligation to meet the needs of those students, and we can't do it here anymore. So they've been deemed to be fit and best suited in a program outside of this district, and that's what we're going to do next year. So Sir,
Yes, I'm Calvin Crouch, taxpayer for 45 years, graduated from here, class of 70. I understand that Hamilton's gentrified. All right, it's not what it was when I grew up here. The problem is I do not think that there is any empathy anymore from this board or the school district towards the lower socioeconomic strata. Last year, my taxes went up 42%. When I came down to pay my school tax, the tax collector, I mentioned it to her, I said, what am I supposed to do? Her response was, sell my house. Yeah, it gets worse. And I said, wait a minute, I built that house myself, I built a small house, and I expect to be able to live in it through my old age. Well, then why don't you go to Madison Lane Apartments? I said, sure, okay, I sell my house, what am I going to do with my $1,300 a month Social Security? Her mouth dropped. I was really happy about that one. In November, I went to sign up for my age exemption thing for the town taxes in Long Rochelle, and I was expressing my concern to her. But she was, first of all, Madison Lane Apartments has got at least a 3-year waiting list, so you don't even have that option. Secondly, my Social Security went up, my COLA went up for 3.2%. I went up $41 last year. She said, why my taxes increased is because of your exemption table has not been revised since 2010. On the table, I went from 12,999 to 1340. These are not reflective of what's going on. In 2010, the federal poverty level was $10,830. The federal poverty level for 2025 is $15,650. Essentially a 50% increase. We have not seen a 50% increase in your table adjustment for inflation. What am I supposed to do? You don't even acknowledge me. Sell my house and move off to Madison Lane Apartments. 45 years I haven't paid any taxes. No, I do not have anything but my Social Security. I'm sorry, I am not part of the gentrified of this town. There's a whole bunch of us out there. Unfortunately, they don't come and speak. They sit and mutter and sputter. As I had mentioned to Mr. Dowsley, when you have a public meeting, you do not put its location as an abbreviation. Because I asked the community around me, what's LGI? Nobody knew. 90% of people aren't even going to have the ambition enough to call to find out what LGI is. When I did Peace Corps in third world nations, they would put down partial information. That's what we've turned into, a country of third world status. We don't put out complete information now. One's got to go have to find it in order to go for a public meeting. You aren't doing your job. And when the assessor tells me, no, maybe this year, 2025, we're supposed to revise this, but to go from 2010 for 14 years, and there was a little bit of inflation in 2020. My oatmeal went from $2.65 to $4. And now you're telling me, well, I liked it at 9.7, but it's not just a 1-year increase, because 9.7 this year, then we'll go another 2.7. It compounds continuously, and I don't catch up. People on fixed income don't catch up. We get buried.
thank you.
Try a little empathy. Try to look at my shoes down in Bryan. I don't ask for anything. I just want to be left alone. But you're making it impossible for me out there.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
Basic question, Sam. Can we go back to your chart of income?
Sorry?
Can we go backwards in your chart where the blue, the red, and the green lines were for your income? Go back. Federation is less than 5 million. Taxes is less than 10, you know, we're over 16. Where's the difference?
A wide range of things, that there's about another million plus in other state aids, expense-driven aids from the state, building aid, interest, BOCES aid, prior year refunds, all of our other miscellaneous revenues.
Okay.
But these are the two primary revenues.
I understood that, I just, you said Colgate gave a generous donation, what do they normally pay a year?
Colgate Colgate gives us a voluntary contribution annually, approximately $250,000.
What is their levy of the properties? Because this is going on in Ithaca right now. Cornell is $1 million. They have got a $10 million tax levy. Cornell's right now offering $3 million. The city is suing them. They're getting off scot-cheap.
I don't have the specific, I can tell you they are our largest taxpayer, I do know that. There is an exemption report that's on our
They keep
website.
taking
I don't,
houses off the rolls.
I'm answering this question. The exemption report is available on our website or available here in the district office. I do not have the assessed value of what's exempt, and I don't have that at my disposal.
No, I wasn't.
Can I
an issue
just
with-
respond to that, because that is the biggest misconception in this village? Every property that they buy that's not on the hill, that's not the athletic, they pay the regular taxes.
All right, so
All the buildings
let's look on
downtown.
Hamilton Street. They tore down Hotel, Holcomb House. And we want to go Talon's Farm. Then we take out the two workers' farms, housing we had. Then we take out Murphy's. Then we take out Leader. They tore the buildings down. So what happens to a tax levy of a property with the residential unit? When the residential unit is removed, what happens to the levy for the bank, for the county plan? 4 or 5 houses at the base of Preston Hill removed. They're now blank plans, there's nothing there. When
Miss-
Hotelling bought all the valley, the first thing he did was tear down all the residences because it would lower his tax rate.
Excuse me, Mr. Crouch. I'm sorry, we do hear you, but you have
I can't
reached,
hear you.
I'm sorry, we do hear you, but you have reached your 5-minute speaking time, and we need to make sure that others have time to speak as well. So I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to ask other.
I'm 73, you have to enunciate.
Yeah, I think we want to move on to the next questions or comments. Well, with regard to Colgate, that information is available. Just one last thing to add on that. The question then becomes, we don't know for sure, and I'm speaking specifically for the school district and the impacts on the tax
I
levy.
understand that.
We're not sure what the impact would be necessarily of Colgate properties being, let's say, hypothetically added to the tax base. It could increase the assessed value so much of our tax base that it depletes our foundation aid by an amount greater than what gets added to the base. So I don't know the answer to that. I'm not going to pretend that I do. But I can tell you that they are a great neighbor to us, very supportive. They don't have to give us a nickel. They give us a voluntary contribution on an annual basis, which is far and away more than what most public schools in New York State get from private post-secondary education institutions in New York State.
And I will say, just a second, Mr.
That I
Carlton,
know.
and I will say, without Colgate's contributions, we would not be able to provide many of the services that we provide to our students on a day-to-day basis.
I was the corporate
M-
treasurer
Mr.
of
Crouch.
the Deacon
Excuse me.
Association Corporation. I
Excuse
paid
me.
In the 80s, $6,000 a year for the fraternity.
Mr. Crouch, I need to move on. Paul, did you have more to your question so that we can get back to yours? Thank you.
I know it's not going to balance the budget or whatever, but the large jump in the Board of Education, what, I mean, it's only like $5 grand, I know it's not, but I'm just curious, you know,
So,
why, you know,
so at the time that the budget is adopted, the budget is adopted before we know what board seats are available. If we have 2 new board candidates, there are trainings involved with each new candidate for the Board of Education. So we budget for, basically based on 2 new vacancies.
so.
And those are required trainings.
No, I'm not
Required
saying,
by law.
so, good luck, you're gonna come on the budget. The other, when you hit on the capital refinancing, to me, that usually means payments go down. Is there, I can't understand the 7 and.
So we're paying interest on the bands, on the short-term borrowings. Currently converting, there's cost of issuance and there's premium and interest payments converting to the bonds. It's our last year for that.
So next year, I would expect to see a great decrease in
Level
capital.
Yep.
Yeah, right now it's the refinancing that's causing.
Well, at the time when that project commenced, the referendum was in December of 2018. Interest rates were a little different back then, so
No,
see the big change in
I'm
bucket, so.
I'm just
That's-
curious.
that's the answer.
In defense, to me, I understand it's like a lot of school districts, but to me, the budget's been always very big for years. I mean, it's, you know, it's just quick line items and whatever, I mean, you know, but I mean, I see most stuff is at 4%, it's within the cap and stuff like it. I'm just curious, an anomaly, that's all. Percent spent per kid, what's been for what? Is it increasing this year because of things like that, or is it going to be low?
Percent spent?
Well, you got, let's say 400 kids in the school district, so that'd be what, about 40,000 per kid, 50,000 per kid? I mean,
Percent or expenditure?
well, like,
Yeah, I mean,
what
our.
percentage of the budget is per kid, basically? You know,
I can't answer that. I mean, every kid is.
No, but I'm saying,
Our
per
expenditure per
per
pupil,
enrollment.
per pupil is increasing without question. Our budget's going up every year and our enrollment's declining.
No,
But we are adding, I use the example of these 5 kiddos that are going to alternative placement. You have a couple kids that have a tuition of $100,000, that's gonna severely skew your cost per pupil, so.
state aid is safe, no matter,
I'm sorry?
state aid is safe for that.
We do generate excess cost aid beyond a certain threshold. So for example, in a public placement, we get back 48% of every dollar over $42,000. So we're on the hook for the first
No,
4
I'm
years.
not against that.
Well, and Paul, too, another thing to understand with our student demographic is our special ed population has grown exponentially. It's about 30, and so the students, yeah, so
But
the,
it doesn't say that in the budget.
Yeah.
thing, you know.
Yeah, no, it's a valid question.
That's why it-
Yeah.
it's in-
And so the students that are still in our building that require services, OT, PT, reading, additional supports, is
Right,
also,
The first year I forget where I was looking, but finally saw that there's 31% poverty rate or something. What were the past years? I don't know.
yeah,
I mean, I've just stumbled across it trying to find more
Sure.
information, you know, because again, you got, in fact, I find a lot of information.
Yep.
On the flip side, I understand what you said, you know, you can't just put 40 kindergartners in one class, but eventually, when you've lost maybe 40% of your enrollment over the years, you know, administration's got to go down. I mean, heck, why do you need 3 principals instead of 1? I mean, you know, 4. I'm just saying there's some cost savings that eventually got to hit from dropping enrollment. I mean, you know, so to me, say, well, you know, yeah, I understand you're with other schools, and I understand that too, but I mean, more so been dealing with shortages for the last 3 or 4 years type of thing. I mean, it was coming. I mean, just, you know, so I mean, to say, well, we're like other schools, there are problems too. So I mean, we've got to start, not just you guys, everybody's got to start thinking differently of ways to fund education and so forth. I understand the state is real, I mean, they fight terribly on foundation aid and stuff like that. So.
Thank you, Paul. Ellen?
Yeah, so Ellen Larson. So it's my understanding that the state just passed free lunch for everyone. Do you anticipate that that's going to impact this budget? Yeah.
No, we are actually part of the community eligibility provision this year. So the community eligibility provision is the technical name of what school districts have to qualify for to offer free breakfast and lunch to all students, regardless of their socioeconomic status. The initial threshold was you had to have 40% of your enrollment be considered in poverty based on the state metrics. We are, for the last 5 years or so, we've been in that 30 to 32% range. We didn't qualify. Last year, that threshold was lowered to 25, so we became eligible. So last year, we transitioned mid-year. This is our first year as being community eligible. Next year, all school districts in New York State are eligible. So there's no change for us. It's a significant piece of chunk of money that the state is committing to public education in the form of providing those free meals.
Breakfast.
Mary Lovelace?
Actually,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
I just want to, so your grid,
Yeah.
Am I reading it wrong? It says 4.77. Shouldn't that be 6.37?
The proposed budget?
There.
Yes, it should. Found a typo.
Huh.
You did, thank you.
The numbers at the bottom are right,
Yeah.
but
Yeah? Yep, it is, thank you.
I don't know.
I don't know if that impacts anything, but,
It doesn't, just a typo.
sorry.
Mayor Loveless?
Yeah, this is a really tough meeting, and I'm gonna guess that there are many districts around the state that are hearing the same thing, that are having the same issues, that are facing these very high taxes. And, you know, I'm watching my retirement dwindle, so, you know, I'm in the mix. I mean, I'm in good shape in a lot of ways, but I can feel the pain of what's going on. I guess I just want to say that this year I have been in Albany a lot. I've heard from all of the top people in Albany, and there's one consistent message that every single one gave, and it was don't count on any funding, because we don't know from day to day, based on the federal government, you know, what's happening with us, how things are going up and down or whatever. Everyone is finding this an incredibly difficult year, whether you're a municipality or whether you're a school district. And, you know, I don't like the big tax, the tax rate as much as anyway, and I feel for people that you're referencing, Calvin, you know, in the district, because it's very real. It's very real. But for example, the food cupboard has just lost tons of funding, and supplies. I mean, there are every organization that tries to help people that are in need of help are being decimated. It is a terrible time for all of us. And I commend you for the hard work that you did. I think the years to come, there are going to be, as Paul said, ways to take a look at changes that might help and whatever, but this is an impossible year. And I just want to point that out because I feel like I'm in the middle of a lot of it. And I thank you for your work that you did.
Yeah,
The school is very important to the community.
Thank you. Just to comment on that, I agree. I think there are a lot of schools that are in the same boat. Frankly, most schools have already gotten to this point. They've already been, it was 3 or 4 years ago that they were at this point. And they did this, and some of them have been decimated as far as their program and their offerings. So we've been fortunate because of the commitment of this community, because of the commitment from our partners, and the support that we've had over the years, that we've been able to sort of stave off this sort of sticker shock for a number of years. I would encourage all community members to be more active participants in the process. We saw it this year. We saw more people come to our meetings over the months in the development process. These are comments that would be helpful to us. I know it would be helpful to me in my role in the development process.
Excuse me.
Well, we talked last year, the electric buses were something that come. I think the new bus, I think it's not electric.
It is not.
Dr. Miller?
It's on hold right now.
No, it's still intact. I think some of the deadlines are going to be pushed back a little bit. We are actively engaged in studies. We conducted a fleet study, and we are now about to take off on an electrification study. Those are the technical terms. No local costs. It's being funded entirely through NYSERDA, through state grants.
Dr. Miller?
It's going to happen.
I don't necessarily mean to be negative, but if this budget gets voted down, what happens next?
Yeah, great question. So we reset, really. There's multiple options. The first thing that we can do is we can go right to a contingency budget, which would be devastating as far as program, reducing considerable amount of expenditures. Under the tax cap legislation, the contingency budget goes to a 0% increase from the prior year levy. So So we're talking, $900,000 that we would have to turn away from the budget. You also have the option to do a revote, which takes place approximately 1 month after the May 20th vote. And essentially what you do is you just reset the clock and you go through this entire process again for a revote. I don't know if it's the third Tuesday of June. There's a universal revote in New York State. And with that, you have a new ballot, the board adopts a new budget perhaps. It can adopt the same budget, it can increase taxes more, decrease, cut, add. You're basically restarting and starting the process again, the whole budget process again, sort of in an expedited manner for that revote in June. If that is unsuccessful, then you go to contingency.
Matt, I just wanted to piggyback what you were saying about, this was the first year I attended, I'm Tori, by the way, teacher. This was the first year I attended the budget coffees, and I ended up going to 2 because I learned so much. And Matt was there, Bill was there were Board of Ed members there, and I could ask questions about things that I kind of assumed, and I was wrong. And there were things that I didn't understand that were clarified, realities about our student needs, and I really strongly encourage so many of the questions that you're asking are questions that I had or other people had, and they were answered in those budget coffees. So I would really encourage you to reach out. We all knew this was going to be a tough year for education, and that was why I paid such close attention. So my suggestion is those budget coffees are a much different environment than this, where you can have those hard conversations in a positive way, where you're brainstorming and coming up with ideas.
Thank you.
Mr. Larson?
Morgan Larson. Matt, would you clarify, you called this a wealthy district. I'm assuming that's from going to the budget copies, that's not your term. Can you clarify with that?
Yeah, so each school district in New York State has a calculated wealth measure called the combined wealth ratio. It is a relative wealth measure that compares all districts to all the other districts. The 2 main components of that wealth ratio calculation are income and property, both on a per pupil basis, where this community has, I don't know what word to use, has taken a hit or seen its wealth go up or get wealthier is the property wealth per pupil. We are unique here. To your point, Mr. Crouch, you're absolutely right. Most school districts in New York State, you see sort of a direct correlation between the income and the property wealth, right? You see kind of parallel lines. Here you see this. The property wealth has done this, while the income has not increased at a rate anywhere near equivalent to property values. We understand that. It's mostly market driven. That's not something we have control over. We know it's concerning to us, it's concerning to the other municipalities, it's concerning to other employers in this community and their ability to attract people to this community, the ability to attract young families with kids, our enrollment, and the ability to retain and keep people in this community. We get that. We see it.
I think we had a question in the back. I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Yeah, my name is Mike Levere.
Nice to meet you.
I just wanted to thank you guys for your hard work and putting forth this budget. I think, so I say this, I have a 5-year-old who's about to start kindergarten, so I really appreciate that, you've found a way to make sure that she will not be in a class with 40 students, but I say that also as just a person who really values education. I think that, I don't like paying more taxes, but I think it's important to note that from paying more taxes, we are getting more services, right? We're gonna have better schools for our kids, not just for my daughter, but for all of her friends, all of the people who are older, who are in the schools, and like, we know that when we spend money on schools, that benefits people. And so, right, they're gonna go on and they're gonna be able to do better throughout their life. And like I think the thing that I just haven't heard in this conversation is that it's not just that we're paying more money, but we're getting something for that more money. And that's something that's like the most valuable investment we can make, which is in our children and in the next generation. And so I really appreciate you guys. I know that it's not easy and it is hard to have to pay these additional taxes, but we're getting something for it, and that's really important to not lose sight of. So thank you.
Thank you for comments.
And
Regina Silvestri.
just speak up, Regina.
As loud as you all have been.
I'm trying.
I can't hear you up here. In response to that last comment, I feel like it's my time to talk. It's a continuing dilemma for people who don't have children in school and yet pay taxes to support the school. It's a dilemma. I've always supported the fact that we must educate everybody, even if it's not our child. We must educate everybody. I support that. But when it gets to the point where we are at here in Hamilton now, especially in the, I don't want to say economy, because the economy was good up until recently. But in the present, let's say, atmosphere, nobody knows what their income is going to be. The older people, they're talking about Social Security issues. And I have never felt this in all of my retired years, that was going to be something taken away from me. So I think one thing that I may have brought up at the coffee was that, and actually I've heard it a little bit during this meeting, and please don't take this as me saying anything negative about you. I think you're doing very hard work, you really do a great job, and Hamilton School is one of the best schools, probably in New York State. But you do have a tendency to, you all have a tendency to be a unit, and your own unit. You talk your own language, you have your own jargon, you know what you're talking about. The LGI, you know what you're talking about. How often have you all thought about the rest of the community who are old, don't have kids in school, don't leave the school, whatever, still have to pay, and maybe can contribute something other than money that will help you pay the bill where you don't have to make it dollars. You know, Matt, you've been standing there talking about how the programs will suffer. Well, we don't even know what programs. You're talking about educational programs, after-school programs, like what programs? Do you explain it? You need to explain it. And perhaps those are some programs that the community can help with rather than us being forced into poverty to pay for it. So basically, that's been my thought throughout this whole thing. I was trying to phrase it in a nice way, but I think that comment really got me to try to say the other half. Because, you know, yes, if I had a child in school, I don't know, I take 3 jobs to help pay for this school. But I'm a whole person. I can't take 3 jobs. I don't even know if I can take 1 job anymore. So, you know, like I tried to say, can you, during the next year, try to think of ways that you can more involve the community to help bring the value rather than a dollar value? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
And I hope that's not illegal.
It may be, but we'll look at it.
Thank you. In the beginning of the meeting, I did mention that there is a concert at 7 o'clock. I don't want to cut people off, but it is 7 o'clock. And so if there is somebody that hasn't spoken yet and has something that they feel that they need to say tonight during this meeting, I give you the moment to do that. And if it's just something that you need to speak to one of us that are still here after the concert starts, there will be a couple people that will stay after. So I'm trying to make sure that I don't cut anybody fully off, and that I give everybody the time that's needed to speak. I appreciate you all. Again, this is not a light decision. We've had many, many hours of conversation. The district has done a lot of work to try to maneuver things within the school, using staff in different ways, and at the end of the day, it's for the children. And so I thank you all for being here. I need a motion to adjourn this hearing.
Move. I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.